Hello and welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports, and today we have a new Ritchey Road Logic rim brake build for a customer who contacted me via email, said, hey, I'm interested, I've been watching a YouTube channel, I'm interested in a Road Logic, and I have two bikes that I need to cannibalize so that we can build one bike. And I said, all right, well, let's bring it in. Let's see what you got. So the headline here is that we were trying to build a budget conscious bike. And I think we did a good job in doing that because we have a group set that came off of one bike. We have a saddle that came off of another bike. We also have, some componentry that is, on the affordable side of things. And finger quote for affordable because this is cycling. So just about everything's expensive in cycling. But we're going to start from the front end, work our way back. And basically we have a 105 group set, Praxis crankset, and Shimano RS wheels. If you're not familiar with the RS wheels, they're the Road Series wheels that Shimano makes so that they can end up in the OE market. And in this case, these wheels were on a Cannondale bike that had these RS wheels, a 105 group set, and FSA crankset. Now, the reason we didn't bring over that stuff, or the crankset, is because the Cannondale Super 6 Evo, which is a great bike, but it was a 63 because it belonged to his uncle, and then the crank arms were 175, so that was not going to work for this gentleman who's about 5'7", right? So we ended up getting a 165 crankset, so we'll get into that in a minute. Starting on the front end here, we've got some Shimano 105 shifters, and as you know, everything on the Shimano side of things works as functionality within the same speed works well. So you could have 11 speed with 105 Ultegra or Dura-Ace shifters and you would be fine. So actually, I'm building a bike for another gentleman, and one of the things I said to him was, we're going to get you this Road Logic frame, but there are three things I do not want you to skimp on. And that is frame, wheels, and tires. Everything else, you can kind of cut a corner here and there. For example, handlebars. Well, you can get one model of handlebars that's, $100, but you can get another model of handlebars that are $150, but your ride quality is not going to change. And neither is the ride enjoyment of your bike, right? But tires, yes, for sure. If you only spend half as much for a set of tires as a performance set of tires, you will notice a ride quality and performance difference. And then wheels also. Wheels, you got to spend the money on the wheels, tires, and of course the frame. We are locked in with the Road Logic, so what else can you get there? Now the handlebars, we had an inventory decision to make. The 40 WCS Skyline handlebar was not in stock, so I said, well, we could either go 38 for the Skyline WCS, or we can get a 40 in the comp version. So if you're not familiar with how the tiers, you have comp, then you have this WCS alloy, then you'll get into the carbon stuff, and you'll get into the Super Logic being the top of the line for Ritchey. But this handlebar is a very, very comfortable perch. Or maybe the perch would be the saddle. Well, anyway, it's a very good handlebar. The shape of it, all of it. And for some folks, they may want a more natural curve here, but I actually like I actually like this little part here. It makes a really good handhold, and it's different than having just the standard curve. My opinion, yours may vary. We went with 105 brakes that came off of the other bike. Now, the gentleman wanted 28 tires, but unfortunately, because these are older rims, they are doing the whole light bulb thing, if you can see that. So they're kind of bulging out and they're not running flush. So these tires only measure 25.5. So it's a 28 tire, and I don't know what the internal or the external is of this RS11. So someone can make a comment down below. But yeah, the tires, we're not getting a full 28 out of them. And this happens, but you know, who knows, maybe we'll upgrade the wheels at a later date. But 105 brake caliper, you got plenty of room inside there. As I mentioned, this is only a 25.5 tire, so that'll be fine. We went with Rubino so that we wouldn't spend as much money on, like, let's say a 5,000 tire. And maybe, you know, in the future he'll come back and say, you know what, now that I've worn through this first set, because we had to do the whole bike build, now let's upgrade the tires. And that's usually a good way to go. That way, you know, it's not the most expensive bike build from the start. But so yeah, so that's probably what I'll suggest to the gentleman. We have the Rev patented top-down wrapping, so just very nice, clean, neat setup. Now on the 53 frames, these cable stops are, you know, closer to the top tube, whereas to the top of the top tube, whereas the 55, it starts to come off to the side. So that's why you can see that cable there. The bottle cages came off of the other bike, the Cannondale. The seat post came off the Cannondale. The saddle, someone told me in a previous post what this saddle was. Again, I don't have my readers on, so I don't know what it is. Maybe that'll help someone. But anyway, it's not that important to know what someone else's saddle is, because you have to ride the saddle that fits your riding style and your physicality. Now, the 165 crank arms in the Shimano world are very, very hard to come by. So I've been doing a lot of Praxis crank sets with a Praxis bottom bracket. The bottom brackets are excellent. I've used them for many, many years. All of my PF30, BB30 carbon bikes, the first thing I would do is get rid of that crank set and the bottom brackets, and then I would put on a Praxis to convert it to Shimano, and so get rid of the BB30, you know, the 30 millimeter spindle and all that. But here, if we use the Praxis bottom bracket, then we have this 30 millimeter spindle. So now you can put this 30 millimeter crank set on a threaded 68 BB. So kind of, I guess, the best of both worlds. Now, new chain, of course, and the cassette was from the other bike. So we just cleaned that up really nice. The rear derailleur, we cleaned that up really nice. And the Eagle Eye amongst you might notice that there's still a protective sleeve on there. So we'll let the customer remove that. Yeah, I mean, this is just a great, great bike. We as far as components and stuff that we had to buy, we just had to buy the handlebars, the tires, cables and housing, crankset, bottom bracket, and chain. But everything else, so wheels, cassette, derailleurs, shifters, stem, seat post, saddle. So quite a bit was already purchased. So, you know, as budget builds go, you know, you could almost call this a parts bin special. You know, although the parts came off of another bike, but and this brings up another point. There are a lot of folks who've been riding a long time, and they eventually want to come back to something simple like rim brake, like mechanical shifting, and they're like, you know what? I want a Road Logic, and I have this other bike I don't ride that much. It's got good components and wheels. Let's strip that and put it on to the new Road Logic. And, you know, this is the way things have been for many, many, many decades until, you know, things started coming out with, you know, electronic this and wireless that. And, oh, you can't put this group set on that bike. And, you know, because, like, for example, many of the newer bikes just don't have cable stops anymore. So you're not going to be able to put a mechanical group set on them. You have to use a Di2 or SRAM access group set. So anyway, I believe that's all for... Oh, one more thing. I had an exchange with someone about why do I have the stem in the up position. And I know I mentioned it in a previous video, but I'll mention it again here. When you build a bike, this is the way I do it, you do you. When you build a bike, I like to have the stem in the up direction and a pretty big stack, 3 centimeters or whatever, so that if the customer later wants to drop the stem, right, or flip it, he has enough cable to do that. However, if you build it with a slammed stem, then there's nowhere to go. You can't raise the stem, you can't flip the stem. So at least this way, the rider has a lot of options on how he wants to ride his front end. Now, one other thing. I also mentioned to the person who made that comment that there are more people that don't know exactly where their handlebars are going to be than there are people that know exactly where their handlebar is supposed to be. Not everyone has done a bike fit. Not everyone needs a bike fit. You just, okay, I know I'm a 53 because I can't be a 55, right? And, well, the 51 is too small as well, so I am a 53. And then I'll just kind of put a stem on here and the seat post. And, you know, there's a lot of shady tree mechanics. That's how they build their bikes. They, you know, they don't need a bike fit. Or they're very body aware. So you could just build your bike and slam your stem or whatever because you have been riding a long time and you know exactly where your bars are supposed to go. But the majority of people don't know that. Majority of people have never had a professional bike fit. It's true, believe it or not, it's true. If you're sitting there thinking, wait a minute, that's kind of one of the first things you do when you get a new bike is get a bike fit. But it just, honestly, it just doesn't happen. So, all right, well, I believe that's all for today. Let me know what you think about this budget conscious build. I think he and I did a good job. I didn't mention, I'm sorry, the Praxis crankset is a Zayente crankset. The Dune is the top of the line. This one's just a little bit more affordable. Let me zoom in there. So he's still got a high quality crankset. This used to be their top of the line crankset, and then they came out with the Dune. So, you know, it was already Praxis's best crankset at one point. All right, well, that is all for today. Please like and subscribe. Oh, wait, one more thing. We also used OptiSlick cables for the derailleurs, and that's really hard to see because it's pretty dark. But I told him, I said, you know, the OptiSlick cables, good quality cables, and you'll be able to get really good performance out of your shifting using that. So, all right, well, that is all for today. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you up the road.